Hello guys, I'm Martin Barna, online nutrition and fitness, and I will be your host today for this podcast. Later on, the recording will be released on my Spotify, YouTube, and Facebook. You can find anything on my web, martinbarna.cz. Many thanks to the Institute of Modern Nutrition, Miroslav and Lukas, for their cooperation and shared enthusiasm for spreading science-based information from the best in the world. Our honorable guest today is Holly Baxter Norton. She's a coach, dietitian, pro runner up world champ, and also co-founder of Team Biolayne, carbon diet coach, and Outwork nutrition official. Hello, Holly. Thank you for accepting invitation.
Hi, good to be back on the show.
How are you today?
I am doing really well. Thank you so much for asking.
Okay, first question. I didn't mention it in the email, but I remember once we spoke last time, you said that you are losing muscle, which was very surprising for me. How is it going?
It's going really well.
Really?
I think for most people, their goal is to gain size. But I guess for me, I've kind of gone through, each of the different federations in efforts to kind of get more muscular. And by the time I got to figure division, the women that I was competing against were extremely muscular. And I think for me, as somebody that's a lifetime natural athlete, I guess it was going to be extremely challenging, number one, to continue to get that muscular. And then I also decided, just as a personal preference, I didn't really care for that physique, like visually how it looked. And it was really hard to buy clothing. And then I think also just the amount of hours and the amount of work that's required to kind of get to that level of muscularity, it was kind of taking over my life. And I think, I kind of took a big step back for a while and decided that I needed to have some other priorities, or there were other things that were important to me. So I basically stopped training my upper body, specifically my back and my chest. They were the two areas that would have needed to continue to grow. So I stopped training those for almost 12 months. I continued to keep my shoulder training in. I love training shoulders, but I lost about 2.5, 3 pounds. And I know it's all from my back. Because my recent stage photos, so I competed recently in August at the World Championship. And I was about 3 pounds lighter than the previous time that I'd been on stage, and nothing in my lower body looked different. It was just my back. So I basically did everything that most of your audience are probably trying to do. So I wasn't doing a whole lot of training at all.
And how the competition went?
It went really well. I placed.
Did you feel better? With the let's say smaller back.
Yeah, so absolutely. That's definitely what my federation was looking for. Otherwise, I would have had to step back up into the figure category again. So I compete in fitness. So it's kind of the middle muscularity. You've got bikini, fitness, and then there's figure. So I'm competing in fitness. So they really like that, like smaller, but still very, very lean, very low body fat, but not quite the big V taper of the figure girls. But I placed, so this year I didn't place as well as I did the last year. I came 4th this year. Last year I came 2nd at World. So I'm going to go back to 2023 and hopefully take a title. I've been at it for about 5 or 6 years now. So hopefully next year will be my year.
Perfect. I wish you luck. I am your great fan. Holly, for girls who are listening and thinking, well, she's losing muscle. How long did it take for her to gain this much muscle? How long do you train, and how often did you train before you started losing the muscle?
Great question. So I actually only started consistently resistance training and following an evidence-based approach in about late 2014. But I don't want to discredit the work that I did for the 10 years prior. I've always been an athlete. I always have been in sport. I did track athletics, and there was an element of resistance training, but it was a lot more like dynamic, powerful kind of, I don't know, explosive leg press and strange things like that. But Yeah, I didn't specifically start training until late 2014. So I was training 5 to 6 days per week. And it started out like most new beginners at about 60-minute sessions. And then as I progressed, and as I kind of reached those plateaus, my training volume needed to go up. So in order to cause that adaptation to build the muscle. So I'd say at my peak of my training, and that was about 4 or 5 years in, so 2000, around 2020, I was probably training 5 days a week for about 90 minutes up to 120 minutes, depending on the session. So it was a lot. But I guess that was necessary for me to continue making that progress. And then now, I guess I still train about 90 minutes or 60 minutes to 90 minutes, but it's mostly on my lower body. I don't do as much on my back and my chest, or I don't train my arms at all anymore. But now I only train 4 days, and that's a personal choice. I don't have the time that I used to. I like my job. I have multiple companies, so I'm kind of busy, and I just have other things that I want to, do and achieve in my life. So I don't train as much anymore, but I guess that's kind of the difference from when I was really pushing 6 days a week up to, 2 hours in the gym, compared to now 4 days a week and, about 60 to 90 minutes. And I think we discussed last time on the podcast, once you've acquired that muscle mass, it's actually really cool to see how much you don't have to do to maintain it. Like the work is getting the tissue and laying down that new skeletal mass. But then if you want to be able to maintain it, you don't have to do as much, which I was always like, really? So, we look at some of the studies, particularly in young people, so those under the age of 40, you can basically get away with doing about, a third less of your normal volume over like a 16-week study period. Research has shown that you can still maintain your muscle mass when you do, about a ninth of what you would normally do. So pretty cool.
That's great. I think you're a good role model for girls, because you have great physique, you compete, and also you are an entrepreneur with several companies. There is not many women I know who does this, so respect. Great example, I think. Okay, let's start with the questions. Could you please briefly define PCOS and the problematic in regard of nutrition and training in women?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will give you a disclaimer. So I am not a PCOS expert by any stretch of the imagination. So as a dietitian, we are, I guess, trained and skilled in a very vast range of different, pathological conditions. And polycystic ovary syndrome, which is what PCOS stands for, is one of them. So it's basically an endocrine disorder, and it will present itself with a number of different symptoms. So things like ovarian cysts, anovulation, which is basically just the absence of a menstrual cycle, and a host of other different endocrine disorders. And some of the more common hormonal abnormalities include some dysfunctions or low levels of things like luteinizing hormone or LH, FSH, follicle system hormone, estrogen, testosterone, and all of those changes actually interrupt the normal menstrual cycle, and they can lead to some other problems down the road. In fact, around, I think the World Health Organization estimates that about 116 million women, or around 3.4% of women, are affected worldwide by PCOS. So, it is a growing, disorder. So it typically presents itself like in adolescence, and it's thought to be due to a range of different factors. So things like your genetics, your environment, your diet and your lifestyle, and then obesity. So there's quite a few things that kind of lead to the development of something like PCOS. And why that is a problem, you might think, well, I'm just not getting a menstrual cycle. Like, what does that really matter? But unfortunately, because of those disruptions and changes to the hormones, it actually puts people at a very high risk of several other comorbidities. So, you know, we're looking at higher risk for type 2 diabetes, infertility. So, you know, women want to have children at some point down the track, you know, if they have these hormonal and endocrine dysfunctions, that may actually mean they can't fall pregnant. Cardiovascular disease, and even some different psychotic disorders. So, you know, it does put you at a high risk for a range of different chronic conditions. So I guess, you know, there are several different diagnostic criteria. They've kind of been updated over the years and they have changed a bit, but I won't go into like the specific details because I'll bore you to tears. But basically, one of the main, I guess, identifying factors is something called hyperandrogenism, which is basically the excessive production of some of the male sex hormones. So testosterone, androsterone, and there's another one as well. I can't think of the name of it, but anyway, but it basically can contribute to, you know, the loss of the period, and then also other negative symptoms like excessive hair growth and a whole host of things that are just not very well experienced or tolerated. So I think one of the things to kind of talk about or discuss is, you know, is there a cure? And there's so many things kind of floating around the internet, you know, and just, you know, she said, he said type statements, but there's actually no, I guess, pharmacological therapy. There's no medication that can cure this syndrome. So what we can do is really focus on tackling or reducing some of the symptoms and the underlying causes. So, for example, we might try to treat some of the ovulatory dysfunction, or we might try to treat some of this hyperandrogenism, or improving somebody's insulin resistance or their infertility. So we can do that through a number of means, and obviously diet and lifestyle, which is kind of where I step in. You know, I provide nutrition and diet and lifestyle intervention for a lot of my clients to kind of help them manage those symptoms and get them back into, you know, the normal healthy reference ranges so that they're, you know, functioning, you know, well again. So I think one of the things that we hear a lot is that, you know, the low carb diet is the type of diet that, you know, tends to be best or optimal, and that you should eliminate sugar from your diet, you know, because sugar increases your insulin production, and, you know, that's what causes PCOS. But in actual fact, if we look at all of the studies on, you know, people that have been diagnosed with PCOS, provided that calories and protein have been equated, any diet type that puts somebody in a calorie deficit has been demonstrated to actually improve some of these symptoms. And most of that is simply by reducing somebody's body weight. Like that initial 10% of weight loss can dramatically improve many of these symptoms, and it can help improve some of those hormonal endocrine dysfunctions. So one of the things that I do with my clients that have PCOS is that we're really just treating them exactly the same as I would, you know, somebody that's coming to me to optimize their physiology, their, you know, their physical health, from a high protein diet, you know, making sure that we've got a balanced diet, you know, ensuring that, you know, we're eating plenty of fiber, that we're looking after our health, our self-care, we're, you know, taking care of our bodies in the way of sleep, rest, recovery. You know, you're just generally looking after yourself. You're reducing too many stresses. We're taking out, you know, some of those environmental things or cues that can just add to the body's stress. So I hope that that gives you a bit of an understanding about what PCOS is, and then how I would go about managing it. Yeah, does that answer the question?
Of course, perfect explanation, I would say. So we do not need any magical supplement to cure, right? I just wanted to mention that, you know, for girls. Okay, about period loss, you know, when you're competing, you go hard on a diet and on training. Some girls, or many girls, lose their period. It will come back, right? I just want to
Yeah, absolutely.
comfort them a
So,
bit.
you know what? I'm not going to say it's an easy process. I have worked with several women through this like recovery journey,
Mhm.
and for many, it has taken many years to get that cycle back. And
Really?
kudos to the girls for sticking at it, because it is a really tough journey, and it usually involves, I guess, restoration of energy balance first and foremost. So for many of these women, there's been a point in which they've chronically restricted their calorie intake, or there's been, excessive or extreme exercise, to the point where, their bodies aren't getting enough nutrients and nutrition, calories, protein, energy to function optimally. All of that energy is basically being petitioned towards the exercise itself, and they're just not getting any extra, to ensure that all those other functions and systems that are essential are able to work optimally. So restoration of calorie intake and energy balance, and that may very well mean for some women that there's going to be a short period of some discomfort where we regain a little bit of body fat. But I think if your goal is to get the menstrual cycle back, to be fertile, to have a family perhaps at some point,
Mhm.
your body needs to be out of this, stressful, energy deprived state. So I usually tackle it with, a conservative reverse diet, which is just the gradual, very slow reintroduction of calories over time. And I also pair that, so it's like concurrent intervention with the slow tapering of highly, strenuous exercise.
Mhm.
So many of these people have been burning the candle at both ends. They're working so hard in the gym. They're training, 6 or 7 days a week, and they're doing high intensity cardio. And then,
Mhm.
they're restricting their diet. And then they've got stresses in their life, in their relationships,
Mhm.
finances, their friendships. So
Mhm.
we've got all this stress. And if people aren't managing that stress well, if they don't have good coping systems, maybe they're like avoidant coping strategies. So they push those emotions down, and they don't really, work through it with active coping. That manifests somewhere in the body. It
Mhm.
really impacts them in a negative way. So, the loss of the menstrual cycle is one of those ways that the body basically tries to protect itself. It's basically saying, you should not have a child right now. You're stressed, you're under eating, you're doing
Mhm.
too much.
Mhm.
So, restoration of calories, slowly getting rid of some of that higher intensity activity, and working towards what I would consider not, there's no such thing as a balanced life, but, you've always got to triage
Mhm.
and, pivot and prioritize. But working towards a lifestyle that is a little bit more, I guess, healthy.
Right.
So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I also found out that reverse dieting is not only tool to, let's say, regain your strengths and etc., but also mentally. I coach few bikini competitors. One of them even professional IFBB now, and we are doing reverse dieting first time in her life now. It's about
That's
2-3 weeks, and the girl is very experienced, very as a coach also. But she told me that it is the first time that she does not have, let's say, disordered eating after the competition. That she eats everything, then stop eating. Everything,
good.
stop eating. She found out that she can go out with the girls and have a life, with just a bit of wine, not everything, just a bit of chocolate and donuts,
Mhm.
and she's happy. And I can see how it changed her head, the thinking about you know more than me, the physique after the competition will not stay the same. But
Uh-huh.
I think she finally found something that helps her to guide her to after the competition, because
Yeah.
dieting you have the goal, concrete goal, but after that there is a loss of that inspiration, I think.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think, a lot of us, and I'm going to say us generalizing women, but I'm sure there's
Mhm.
plenty of men too, We have what I refer to as like dichotomous thinking. We are black or white, good or bad. We have this extreme personality where it's like, I'm going to restrict everything I possibly eat. I have all these, forbidden foods and things that I can't eat. But then at the same token, over time, that buildup of desire, it's like we only have so much willpower. So naturally, if you've forbidden so many things during a competition, which, for a lot of athletes, that unfortunately is the mindset that they've developed or they've been educated on, which is inaccurate. It's just natural to swing back the other way and want to eat all of the good fun foods, the things that give you that, psychological satisfaction. Because we can have satisfaction physically in the sense of fullness, like I've eaten too much food, I feel full. But if you restrict all the things that you like, you're not getting psychological satisfaction. So it's a really fine balance, I think, for, competitors now of being able to incorporate just enough of those things that satisfy, their mind and their eyeballs, as well as, keeping them full and also achieving the goal of fat loss. So yeah, implementing that reverse diet afterwards, I guess it's a nice way to slowly allow the reintroduction of those calories, slowly reintroduce some more of those foods that perhaps they haven't been able to have quite as many of, during the competition. And I can say that was almost like the turning point for me. And hand up, as somebody that suffered from an eating disorder for 15 years, that was like the switch for me. When I first started to go through this reverse diet process, and I really had a sound understanding of how body fat and muscle gain, or body fat loss and muscle gain worked so synergistically together, it was like it just switched for me. And I no longer have an eating disorder. It's taken me a few years to heal from that. But yeah, the reverse diet is definitely one of those processes that have helped me gain muscle, because it's meant that there's a period of time where I'm not dieting, I'm not restricting, because I know I want to build muscle. So, I kind of have to put myself in this position of discomfort, but I know it's going to give me good long-term results. So I have to focus less on maybe how I feel right now. As I'm eating more, I might have a little bit more body fat. But I know body fat can be lost at any point, but muscle can't be built. That takes the work. You need to have time committed, carved out to build that muscle. So that was my motivation to not diet and to learn how to sit with that discomfort of feeling a little bit fluffy. And so worth it. So worth it. It's very, very valuable lessons.
That's great. Do you prefer a slower or faster tempo of the reverse diet?
Look, I think it depends. It depends on the individual. For me personally, usually my reverse diets have come immediately after a bodybuilding show. So in my situation, where I've been on extremely restricted calories by the end, because we have to get so lean, and I'm, a natural athlete, so my endogenous metabolic rate isn't super high, like some of the girls that I've heard are eating like 2,500 calories on their last week of their fat loss phase before getting on stage. I'm like, wouldn't it be nice? But mine's usually modest to aggressive, just in the first few weeks. And that I basically pick a target that I know I can adhere to. I pick a number that I'm like, all right, I can stick to, maybe it's 1,650 calories in my first week back after being on 1,200. I'm like, yep, I can do that. So I will initially have a little bit of body fat regain. And I also drastically change my training after a competition, because I just can't maintain, the amount of, frequency of my sessions and the amount of steps that I have to do, and then the cardio that comes along with it. So, that's not sustainable long term, at least not for me, with, several companies, 2 children, a husband to manage, and then my own personal interests. So for me, I choose to kind of do away with some of that exercise pretty quickly. And I wear the body fat regain. I'm okay with that, because it's bringing back my sanity. It's bringing back my health, mental health. My mood improves instantly. I get my strength back. I get my energy back. I'm sleeping better. I'm no longer as obsessed with food. And I will say, even when we reintroduce calories in that reverse diet, it is not always a guarantee that your hunger is restored instantly. In fact, here at the University of South Florida, under Dr. Bill Campbell's lab, there was a study that I actually participated in and I guess co-authored on. And there were, I guess we looked at or investigated the reverse diet period. And during that time frame, we monitored all kinds of different biomarkers, blood work, body fat percentages, muscle thickness testing, all that kind of stuff. And what was really interesting is that despite many of the participants' calories being restored to normal, to a healthy amount of calories based on their lean body mass and how active they were, and some of these people have gained back all the body fat pretty quickly, their leptin levels, which is that key appetite regulating hormone, were still down at a very low number. So leptin usually corresponds nicely with your body fat because leptin is produced primarily in our adipose tissue. So you would assume that as your body fat returns after a competition, that your leptin levels come back up as well. But in this particular case, it didn't happen that way for everybody. So you may still feel extremely hungry. It's called hyperphagia. It's when the body desires more than it requires. People will say to me after their competition that might be their first or second one and they haven't experienced it before, and they're like, why am I still so hungry? I can't stop thinking about food. And I'm like, that's okay. It's normal. It will take time. So I think, this whole reverse dieting process really helped teach me patience, something that I had none of. And then eventually I was like, if I just, be patient with this calorie reintroduction, things will actually start to feel better. So I just changed my expectations a little bit.
Do you think body fat set point played a role in the study? Someone had higher body fat before he started dieting, someone lower, and does it corresponds with the result?
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure there's probably some research to back me up on this. I would say that everyone's, I guess, body fat set point is a little bit different. And, when we diet and restrict our calories and then, we kind of end the diet, there is this, the body wants to shift back towards this set point. It's like your hedonic, your endogenous body fat set point. Now, if you are able to maintain that new level of leanness for a meaningful amount of time, and again, I think there's 1 or 2 bodybuilding case studies on this. It took about a year to 18 months of maintaining this kind of new body fat set point before their hormones and everything began to normalize. And I just look at that and go, that's adaptation at its finest. The body has a set point. It wants to maintain homeostasis. It wants to stay within equilibrium, what it's used to being like. So you can imagine for somebody that's extremely overweight, they're morbidly obese, their body is used to functioning in this environment. These are their normal hormonal levels. So when we change it up and then all of a sudden they diet down and they do lose a significant amount of their body weight, it's not, the body doesn't and cannot adapt that quickly. It is pushing to go back to what it was. So, being able to find a dietary intervention or a diet approach or preference that is sustainable for the individual makes this so much more important, because we know that the body wants to adapt back to what it was. So, we look at some of the long-term, epidemiological studies where we follow people. The consistent finding is that the people that have a dietary approach that feels least restrictive to them is the one that they're able to sustain long term. So,
Makes sense.
experimenting with different diet types for everybody, and I've tried so many over the years, I think that's really important, because once we break down all of the stigma, and once we break down that, fad diets, they're just that, they're fad diets. So when we know that the key components to successful long-term weight loss maintenance are, adequate calorie intake for the individual and adequate protein intake, and then the remaining calories from carbohydrates and fats really doesn't matter that much, then we've got every single food back on the table. So now it's up to the individual to experiment and try different types of food preferences to see what feels easiest for them. And it might change over the course of your life as well, because your lifestyle might change. You might have spit out twins. Now you've got 2 kids and you can't do the same dietary approach that you used to do when it was just you and your husband. So, I think you have to be open to adapting yourself and being flexible in your approach. I mean, for me, my dietary approach changes week to week. Some weeks I'm really high fat, and it's because I haven't had time to go to the groceries and I've only got peanut butter left in my pantry. So it's making
What
up
a coincidence.
And then other weeks, it's, well, I had my chef make me up 10 different meals and I've got everything that I could want. So, I think it's important to be open to flexibility. And I think, being able to adapt and to adjust is also a really important skill.
That is what I love about being a coach. You help people to find a lifestyle, habits that serves them, not that they are slaves of the habits, because let's say I do low carb, so every client has to do low carb. No, he can find out what he wants or she wants. We adjust the numbers and it works. That's great. Holly, do you change somehow water and sodium intake during peak week?
No, I don't. I
Great.
guess if we look at like how or what the function of sodium and water are as it relates to muscle physiology, there is really no need to make any major changes to your sodium and water. I hear a lot of, I guess, bros that haven't actually got a biochemistry background, or they haven't done any science, and they're just kind of applying things that they've heard. A good example is like the water loading protocols, where they are drinking, like, I don't know, what's a high number, 20 gallons of water a day in like their peak week. And I guess there's this theory where the renin-angiotensin system, which I guess is basically like your body's, process for excreting, excess toxins and water as well out of your body. The theory is that, you get rid of all the water and that will dry you out. Like you have so much water that this system ramps up and overdoes it, so that then all of a sudden you're really dry when you're on stage. And that couldn't be the worst. That's got to be one of the worst bits of advice that I've ever heard. Like, you don't want to be dry on stage. A muscle looks really good when it is full of glycogen and it's accompanied water. So one of the whole protocols when we do a peak week is to reintroduce carbohydrate, after, some period of time of restriction. And we want that carbohydrate to move into the muscle tissue where it's stored as glycogen. And there's a fine balance of finding what that is for the individual, because we've all got different muscle mass amounts. So you can't just, shoot out random numbers to, 3 or 4 different clients with all varying body compositions. It has to be tailored to them. So that glycogen helps to fill out the muscle. And then for every 1 gram of carbohydrate that is stored as glycogen, we've got about 2 or so mils of water that kind of moves into the muscle as well. And that is the look that we want to achieve. If we modify our water intake or we modify our sodium intake, both of those things can have a negative impact on your, I guess, body's or your muscles' hydration status. So if we have too much sodium, for instance, that's going to draw a lot of water into the extracellular spaces of our muscle. And then, you're going to look watery. But if we have too little sodium, then there won't be enough water in that extracellular space. And that can make you look flat. So the best approach is really just keeping it pretty consistent. So like my normal fluid intake probably consists of, I don't know what it is in gallons because I'm Australian, but I think in liters, I probably drink like 3 to 4 liters on average most days, maybe a little bit more in the summer if I've been outside. So my whole peak week, my fluid stays the same. And I do become a little bit more, religious about it. I make sure that I am getting in enough because I don't want to be dehydrated getting on stage. And my sodium level stays pretty much the same right until, the morning of, and I've got a big high sodium bolus. And that actually helps increase vascularity because you've got to think about the role of salt in the blood. If we've got a high solute concentration, you're no longer in equilibrium. The body needs more water to balance that out. So we will retain more water when there's more salt around, and that causes vasodilation. So we get that, very vascular look. So I'll do that like 2.5 hours out from being on stage, which is about the time that it can take for that to actually take effect. But that's it. It's pretty similar every single day leading up to show days.
It's perfect. And also, if you limit your sodium intake, let's say no sodium, like some people use, then you just there was a study on the soldiers. I think you know about that. You were aware. Just urinary sodium goes down, aldosterone goes up, so you retain more water, and the blood sodium doesn't change at least for 5 days. So in peak week it should be the same.
Yeah,
I'm glad that you're saying this. I've asked because in our country it's crazy. It is like in medieval. We were at the competition. Really, we were at the competition with my client Veronica, and I said to her, "I will help you with the prep, but only doing peak week science-based." Like the exact thing you said, we did, and the girls were crazy when they saw what she had for breakfast. She drank, and they were like, "What the?" It's unbelievable, and she won in every category.
Oh, that's so awesome.
And I'm really glad for that because I wanted to show girls that you doesn't have to be crazy, or it doesn't have to be so, let's say, health hurting.
Yeah,
and you still can look great and win.
I think there's just this idea that in effort to look your best, like there has to be something super extreme that enables you to get that way, right? So,
Exactly.
When you say to somebody, you've got to drink 20 liters of water every day in your peak week, or you're not allowed to have any water, 3 days out, it's like, oh yeah, that sounds really hard. That must be why they look so good on stage. So, I understand like where the logic comes from, but our bodies need water. It's made up 70% of our body is water.
Exactly.
So to think that a dehydrated muscle looks good. So one of my first mistakes when I first competed was I was so nervous and busy running around. This is back in 2015, that I actually forgot to have like my normal fluid on the show day. So normally I'd get up and I'd have a couple of cups of coffee. Then I might have, some kind of cereal with milk, and then a few, I might have a couple of these throughout the day. And I reflected back on my first show pictures and I'm like, oh my gosh, I hardly drank that day and I looked flat as a tack. And then, 6 weeks later, I competed again, reminded myself, drink fluid, what I normally do. And now all of a sudden, my muscle looked fuller again, it was popping at all the right places and, a significantly better outcome. So yeah, we don't need to do anything crazy. The only thing, and we've actually got this really clearly mapped out in one of our books, the Complete Conscious Prep Guide.
Great book.
Table that talks all about, sodium, water, and then how to plan out your peak day. So what do you do on show day? And it's like, it tells you exactly what amount of protein you should be having, carbohydrate, and it's all based on your individual prep. So we look back at your last 4 weeks and we work out averages for things like your carbohydrate, for your fats, your sodium, your water, and then we basically just kind of make this pretty little table to help you understand like how much you actually need. So yeah, if you haven't got that book, go check it out.
It is a great book. I really recommend to everyone. Yeah, really. Yeah, if you do not lose enough body fat, Pickwick won't save you. If you lose enough body fat, Pickwick can do nothing for you. You don't need anything.
No, and I said that to many women, you know, first timers, and they've come to me pretty late into their prep and they want some final like finishing touches. And yeah, in many cases, they have not got lean enough. So, and then, you know, they'll say, well, are you going to do some kind of magic in the peak week? I'm like, there is no magic that will help you at this point, because the magic on the stage comes from being really lean, and me doing some kind of, you know, carb loading protocol to like fill out your muscle when I can't see your muscle because there's still some body fat there. And that's okay. Like I say this with no judgments. I'm all like, embrace your body, whatever size. But for this particular sport, you know, if you've got too much body fat, no amount of carb loading or back loading or salt loading is going to help you, you know, win that competition. Like you have to be lean for that kind of manipulation to have a positive effect.
Perfect. I'm really, really thankful you are saying all of this, because I will send it to all girls competitors I, you know, talk with, because they don't believe me. They think I'm some crazy guy. But
yeah,
you know, okay, let's switch to another topic if we can. How about collagen supplements and your skin? Is it needed? Is it not needed? Does it have any benefits?
Yeah, collagen. So again, I'm always about the disclaimers. So I'm not a skin doctor, so I am a dietitian by trade. But
Yeah.
I guess the good thing is I can read science. So I have definitely looked into this. As a female, I still care about, you know, skin complexion and that stuff. So I guess I'll talk a little bit about what it is and the different types of, I guess, supplementation, and then what tends to work, and then my general feelings. So collagen, I guess first and foremost, for anyone that doesn't know, it's just a type of protein. It's one of the body's most abundant proteins, and the building blocks of our bones, our skin, our muscle, our ligaments, our tendons, all those types of things. And there are about 20 something, because I'm going to guess like 25, 28 different types of collagen. However, type 1 collagen, and if anyone's got supplements at home, you'll be able to pick up the packet and usually it will say type 1, but that accounts for about 90% of the collagen in the human body. So it's composed mainly of, I guess, a few specific amino acids. So glycine, proline, and hydroxyproline. So those amino acids are basically what form the strands and that kind of triple helix structure that makes up collagen. So there are cells in our connective tissues that are called fibroblasts, and they are responsible for producing collagen, and they're also responsible for maintaining collagen. And as we get old, all of those collagen cells, I guess, kind of become fragmented, and the function of those fibroblasts become impaired. So our collagen production starts to slow down. So it's those changes that we experience, unfortunately, with aging, that contribute to the loss of that, like, I guess, elastin, and that can lead to the signs of skin sagging and wrinkles and all the fun things that come along with getting really old. So I guess there are several different types of products that we can use. Some of them are topical. However, there just isn't enough research to show you that these topical products, I guess like lotions, creams, serums, they just don't reach the deeper layers of our dermis. We need something that is more bioavailable, and the bioavailability will help with having like lasting impact. So there have been a couple of studies that have looked at different types of collagen supplementation. So like collagen hydrolysate, I guess. There's collagen tripeptide and then collagen dipeptide. And I guess all of those different types of collagen have been, and this is subjectively, shown to help improve skin elasticity, skin hydration, tightness, wrinkles, those types of things. That's when it's oral. Anything that's topical, there's just doesn't work. So if you've got cream, don't worry about it. More recently, so there was a 2019 study, and I put a post up about this on my Instagram recently. They found that bovine hydrolyzed collagen is actually one of the better, more bioavailable sources because it does have that very specific amino acid ratio that I talked about before. So if you're going to supplement for the purposes of improving like skin elasticity, skin, hydration, all those types of things, then bovine type 1 hydrolyzed collagen tends to be the better type. So I guess there isn't really any downsides to taking it. I will say, however, if we wanted to look at collagen and, it's going to take up some of your protein intake on the day. So like if you're, let's say my protein target in the day is, 140 grams per day. I may end up using 10 to 15 grams of my daily protein targets on collagen, which may very well help with my complexion and my skin elasticity. But on the other hand, if I wanted to optimize muscle mass, then collagen is not, an appropriate protein source for helping with muscle protein synthesis. Animal-based proteins, so coming from like, beef, chicken, poultry, those types of things, eggs, that contains a high amount of the amino acid leucine. And that particular amino acid is the one that is most prominent in signaling muscle protein synthesis and helping to build muscle. So I'm kind of this opinion that if I already eat a really high protein diet, I'm probably getting a good amount of those specific amino acids already that are, high in, I guess the ones that are necessary for skin elasticity and hydration. So I don't supplement with a collagen. I just assume that I'm getting a good amount for all of those things. But if you were really not worried about building muscle at all, and you just wanted to have like perfect skin, then I'd probably just have a lot of collagen. But that might be detrimental to my health in other ways. So I think I kind of have a bit of a balanced approach. And if I'm being honest, there are no studies at the moment that look at, the benefits of collagen production, collagen supplementation in individuals that already consume a high protein diet. It's all been done on a very heterogeneous population group, women of all ages, and they have shown that there are benefits to collagen supplementation on hypertrophy. But is that just because they previously had a really low protein intake and now they're having a high protein intake? Whereas I would almost have to say, and again, I don't know the answer to this because I don't think there's a study yet, unless it came out like in the last 2 months. But if women were already consuming a high protein diet, like, myself, I have like 2.5 grams of protein per kilogram of lean body mass. I don't know whether there'd be any additional benefits because I think I'm probably already getting enough, and that's for both skin health and muscularity.
Yeah. Perfect. But I really think that it would be different in people who consume enough proteins, because let's face it, most women do not consume enough proteins from several reasons. At least in my point of view and what I've seen. Most of my clients are women.
It's funny. I think the clientele and the people that I work with, and again, I have to get out of my own bubble because I think that all the people that I know and the people that I've worked with, I guess, if they've followed me for a long time, They're like protein.
Yeah.
But I guess, in non-Westernized countries, or, just different societies where there's less of an emphasis on, strength and muscle bodybuilding. Yeah, I would totally agree with you. Protein intake is so low. In fact, I just randomly asked my mom, last time I saw her, like, can you just do a food recall? Like, tell me what you eat. So I wanted to know how much protein she had. And it was like 50 grams for the whole day. I'm like, oh my God, Mom,
Crazy.
gotta eat more protein.
Yeah, exactly. And if we're talking about the general population, if I want to, let's say, make a girl to eat more proteins, I I cannot say you will have more muscle. I just say you will have better skin, better hair, and etc. And they also have the benefits, from dieting standpoint and from fitness standpoint. But then they personally they tell me also that, yeah, Martin, it really, my skin is better, my hair are better, everything is better from the beauty standpoint, let's say.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we just found out, collagen is very, I guess, very important in, I guess, the maintenance of of those things. So
Yeah. Are there any effective supplements for women in regard of beauty? I mean, for example, keratin, or how is it called, for the hair, etc., or just enough protein, you think?
I think that just adequate supplementation of protein in general is probably going to help with most of those things. Just knowing that, like hair, skin, nails, the building blocks are all protein. They're all structural amino acids, and just different combinations of those amino acids. So I can imagine that, provided that you're consuming an adequate amount of protein, high quality protein sources in general, then I don't think that you really need any other supplements, considering we know that amino acids are the primary building blocks of most of these things. So yeah, there's nothing that I personally take, though. I'm not a dermatologist. I'm not a skin doctor. There are various products and things I know that a lot of women like to use, but they're usually oral supplementation, and it would only be beneficial in those people that are already like somewhat deficient in those amino acids or those compounds already. So it would just simply be getting them back to what we'd consider a normal amount of those, that those would be the only people that would have any kind of benefit. So yeah, I don't think that taking any extra protein, would help.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Do you adjust diet and training with women who has their menstrual cycle?
Do I adjust?
If you adjust nutrition and training during the menstrual cycle of your clients, I mean women, of
Oh,
course.
yes. Okay. So great question. Thinking about how menstruation can impact your, I guess, performance. For some people, yes. I think if we look at a lot of the research, and I have a feeling we chatted about this last time on your show, there are a half dozen or so studies that look at females' menstruation and then their strength and hypertrophy outcomes. And the results are pretty varied. So I tend to screen my clients like before they start with me, and like subjectively, how do you feel when you're training around the time of your cycle? We also look at ovulation. So like, at the halfway point, are you somebody that experiences any negative symptoms? Are you getting some of those hormonal fluctuations, or, the typical cramping, mood swings, just they are hormonal related. It is the endocrine system working at its finest. So depending on their answer, then, I may very well make modifications to their training. So I may make some adjustments to somebody's training protocol. So whether it is around ovulation or right when they're about to get their period, when progesterone is highest, that tends to be when we start to experience some of those negative symptoms, if any. And I will plan a deload specifically around, their period, because, and I'm one of these people as well, where I do see some small changes in my performance. It may not manifest as an actual true strength loss, but I do not feel very good. So you know, at the end of the day, it's just a feeling. So if I made myself go and do it, you know, I'd probably get through it just fine. But, you know, the perception of difficulty, the perception of fatigue and low energy and my motivation, it's low. So for my mental health, that would be my reasoning for doing a deload on that week. So I can go in and I don't have to put that immense amount of pressure on myself to perform, you know, and continue to execute what my normal, you know, training volumes would be. But, you know, like I said, it's so variable. It really depends on the person. So I just ask those questions. I would say to girls, hey, if you notice that you feel, you know, absolutely garbage, like, okay, we're not going to do HIIT cardio, you know, when you're ovulating, because you clearly said that it makes you, you get a lot of pain, you're, you know, not happy. And then, you know, with your training, we'll take deloads on your cycle so that we don't have to push so hard. We'll use other weeks, you know, in the early first phase of the cycle, where your higher volumes, you know, the higher intensity sessions are going to be located in that mesocycle.
And how about sweet cravings, let's say, during the menstrual cycle? Do you have some tips how to solve this?
Interesting. I was actually reading something about this the other day, and it could absolutely be garbage. It was, I don't know where I read it. Could have even been in a magazine on a plane. I don't know. So this is just anecdotal. It might have been based on something, but it's actually like sweet and salty cravings are predominant cravings. And one of the reasons for that is when we get our cycle, and I'm going to answer your question, but when we get our cycle, obviously with some of those changes, increases in progesterone, a reduction in estrogen, that has a similar effect as sodium. We retain water, so we get a little bit more fluffy. You look different in the mirror because you've got more extracellular fluid floating around. So, you know, you can appear to lose some of that, you know, definition around your cycle, but it's not body fat. It's just too much water. So in that state, what happens, and I'll ask you this question, what happens to the body when there's too much water and not enough solute? You need more solute, right? So we crave more sodium. Like we want to eat more of that to balance out the disproportionate ratio of water. We want to have equilibrium. So that is one of the reasons why we crave salty foods, because of that, you know, increase in body water. So as far as like managing that, I've actually said to clients, there are salt substitutes, I guess. I guess the frustration is that lots of these salty foods also tend to be extremely calorie dense. So to avoid binging on, you know, salty foods that are super calorie dense, you know, maybe try just, you know, salting a little more aggressively on your normal, like lower calorie foods, to kind of hit that craving and to help with your body's, you know, balance, sodium balance, or solute balance. And then I would also say maybe on the weeks of your cravings, make those your calorie cycling high days. Like I go to maintenance on my period. Every time I have my cycle, I am not dieting on that week. I am going to allow myself to eat what my body needs. And, you know, I think there's also the element of emotional eating, because of that dysregulation in hormones. Some people that do cope with their emotions by eating, it is only enhanced when we get our cycles. So you'd want to address the emotional coping strategies as well. But I always say, take a diet break on your cycle week, or whenever you experience those PMS symptoms most strongly, so that you don't have to be trying to restrict all those things that your body kind of needs at that time. But yeah, I think if someone already struggles with binge eating and emotional eating, unfortunately, it really sucks. It means that they are probably going to be even more susceptible to overeating on their period because of the wild swings in hormones, which make you emotional. You're more teary, you're more cryy, you know, you feel you're moody, you're just a emotional mess. So I would also be concurrently working with a client on learning new coping mechanisms that don't involve food. So like stress management. So there's, from my coaching, there's, yes, diet and exercise is a big focus, but there's also a really large component of psychology, because they don't exist in isolation. We exist as a whole person. So you can't just address these things over here that are diet and exercise related without also focusing on, you know, their behaviors and their habits and their mindset.
So if you have a client with binge eating problems, or let's say emotional eating,
Yep.
you use sometimes reverse dieting, and of course you adjust the habits and psychology. You find something else to do for the client instead of eating, right?
Yeah, look, it's quite a process. I guess the technique, and there's many different techniques in like the psychology space, but it's just cognitive behavioral therapies. So we tend to, I guess, tap into the root causes. Like, let's try and find the underlying stress for an individual. What are your triggers? You know, and then where does that come from? And we try to first understand, you know, the client, identify the root cause, and then we try to find healthy coping strategies. And it's a very client directed relationship. You know, I'm asking my clients to put together a list of, you know, what are some things that help you to relax, because what helps me to relax might not help you to relax. So
Yeah, right,
it's going to be very different. And any kind of behavioral change, based on all of the research in neuropsychology. In fact, Dr. Caroline Leaf is somebody that I have recently, probably in the last year, started following a lot. She's great. So her research looks at some different behavioral techniques and psychological techniques to implement like long-term habit change. And it's about 60 days of repeated, so daily mindset change. So on a daily basis, you have to be putting that new thought, that new stimulus, that new feedback into your mind and your thoughts. And over time, that will then help you change your behavior. It will help you change how you act. It will help you change how you respond to that stress. So if your form of stress coping, you know, maybe it's emotional eating, over time, we move ourselves away from food as a, you know, something that elicits that temporary, you know, comfort. It gives you this warm, fuzzy, you know, food tastes good. It's a temporary distraction. It is not going to solve the problem. So we start to work towards, okay, what are some other ways that we can help this individual manage their irritation or frustration or whatever that emotion might be. So I can't really give you like the exact, you know, script for how it would work, because it is quite different from each person. So we just experiment, try different things until we can kind of get something that sticks, and then we just got to hammer it for 60 days, it's then, you know, part of their new, that's who they are. They've got this new character. They have new habits.
That sounds really interesting. Do we have time for 2 or 3 more questions? Or
I've got about 10 more minutes.
Okay, I will stick to that. 10 more minutes. Thank you very much for that. Okay, how do you convince your client that she needs a reverse diet? You know what I mean? Sometimes it is needed, but they don't see it, and you know, it's good for them.
I don't want to convince anybody. What I have learned over the years is that you can't convince somebody to do something they don't want to do. So what my approach would be is, again, I am all about empowering women with knowledge and education. So my first role in a coach-client relationship is to help them understand the concept of the human body. I try to help them understand the concept of human metabolism. I try to help them understand, you know, what negative adaptation looks like. I try to teach them and educate them about what behaviors contribute to slowing or slow down effect on our basal metabolic rate, what slows down our metabolism. And I'll go through, you know, the excessive calorie restriction, yo-yo dieting. And then, you know, when we eat again at our previous calorie intakes, you know, prior to the diet, we are in this, you know, very compromised situation, or like it's a strange hormonal milieu where now our body is primed for body fat regain. So it's about educating them first. And then I'll apply that education to their behaviors. Here's what you're doing. Here's why you've tried to diet unsuccessfully multiple times and you've regained weight. And maybe you weigh more now than you did 5 years ago, but you've been trying to diet. Like, that's not uncommon. Because over time, your metabolism adapts and it adapts and it adapts and it gets more efficient. So I kind of explain that to them first. And then I tell them, if you want to diet right now, here's what that will look like. And here's the calorie deficit that I'd have to create for you to do that. Good luck. You're going to be eating air for the next month. That's my ethical conduct, and I'm not going to do that. So, you know, it really is like education. And when someone can understand that concept, and then they can stand back and reflect at their own behaviors, and they see, oh yeah, I've just been going around losing the same 5-10 pounds over and over. Yeah, I see the benefit of not dieting and spending time building my muscle, because that lean body mass, that is one of the primary drivers of getting your BMR up. Like, that takes your metabolism up. If you've got more muscle, you get to eat more. Great. You know, and it will, it has so many other positive effects, like downstream effects. So yeah, I don't convince, I explain, and then I apply that to them, and then they've got to want it. And a lot of the time, the challenge is them accepting that they may have to stay where they are, and that might already be a place that they're not comfortable in themselves. They might already feel like they're too fluffy. They've already got too much body fat. They're already unhappy in themselves. And in many cases, and I've been this person as well, they may have to go through a period of a little bit more body fat gain above where they're already uncomfortable, and that would be in efforts to build more muscle. So a lot of the time, the work that's being done is actually working on loving their bodies, appreciating that they are worthy, that they are valuable, that they are enough exactly as they are. And that process, even though it feels uncomfortable, even though it might mean that you put on a little bit more body fat, it is temporary discomfort. And the benefits that are going to, you know, come from this process in a couple of years down the track are going to far outweigh any of the discomfort that you feel now. So it's really a lot of psychology coaching. It's
that's
coaching.
Great approach.
Yeah.
Really perfect. Thank you for the answer. Holly, is there something like too much cardio in contest prep? I think you know what I mean.
Yeah. Look, I think sometimes, again, at the elite level, like at pro level, in order to get to the conditioning that somebody needs, they may have to do a really unrealistic and unsustainable amount of cardio. And that might be, maybe they just left it too long. Maybe they didn't start dieting early enough, and therefore, in efforts to lose the body fat that they need to get off for the show to be competitive, in the last couple of weeks, they've got so much body fat they still need to lose that would be the only way for them to get it off. Like, you have to be in a certain energy deficit to lose that. So I've seen some pretty crazy things, but it's usually just poor planning, or they've tried to diet when they're not in a healthy space metabolically. Ideally, and it can be done, I'm living proof, and I've got thousands of clients that are living proof. You don't need to be doing hours of cardio every day if you do your nutrition and you apply an evidence-based approach to your diet and your exercise. So for me, in my last several years of competing, the most amount of high intensity cardio that I've done in a week period is about 90 minutes maximum.
Perfect.
So like, and that was probably my most difficult. Last year, I was only doing 45 minutes of HIIT cardio once. Everything else was lifting. And then I just hit a consistent daily step count of about 12,000 steps. So, but that's with adequate planning, making sure my metabolism's healthy before I decide I'm going to do a competition. And then, you know, kind of getting rid of some of the binge eating type behaviors that would always set me back again and again. Like I'd have to try and play catch up. So it was working through some of those bigger issues to be able to really get rid of a lot of the unnecessary cardio that I didn't need to actually do. So yeah, you can definitely do too much cardio though. I've seen it to the point where it starts to impact like high intensity cardio directly impedes mTOR signaling. That is the signaling cascade that needs to take place in order for muscle protein to be built. So it works along a continuum. So, you know, if you said to me, Holly, I'm only doing an hour, I'm doing an hour run and I do it twice a week. It's at a low intensity, you know, the negative impact of something like that. And maybe she's doing it on, you know, the 2 days that she's not lifting, I'd say it's probably not going to do that much. You know, there was a recent meta-analysis. In fact, I'm posting about it tomorrow. I think it goes up with concurrent training. And I think it's really been overblown, provided that you can separate out your lift resistance training from your cardio by a few hours or more, and that you're refueling adequately between your sessions, that you're resting and recovering, that you're doing like you're just looking after your body. You're not staying out late, you're getting good sleep, you're eating enough protein, you know, provided that you're doing all of those things. Doing some cardio with your resistance training, like endurance-based cardio, it's probably not going to have that much of a negative impact. But like I said, everything exists on a continuum. If you came to me and said, Holly, I'm doing a 2-hour run and then I do a 1-hour bike ride and then I resistance train and then I go for a swim for 2 hours as well, like, is that going to affect my gains? I'm like, yeah.
Of course.
So it works on a spectrum.
Perfect. Is there anything you would like to say to our audience I did not mention? Or
I could talk all day.
yeah.
But no, honestly, I think if you guys are looking for more information, you know, obviously Martin's got some great stuff on his social media channels and in his podcast.
Thank you.
But
Thank you.
As a female, sometimes it's nice to get your advice or just have an outside perspective. So my social media is just Holly T Baxter. So I'm very active on YouTube and I'm also very active on Instagram. And it's basically just, it's education. I'm not there, you know, to look pretty. I'm trying to help people, you know, achieve like their optimal, like their best self, mentally, physically. So yeah, that's where they can find me.
Yeah, like I said, for me, you are a role model for the girls. I use you as an example for my clients. So definitely look at her Instagram, Facebook, and also YouTube channel, of course. Okay, I will mention it in the comments, you know. Holly, thank you very much for your time. I know you are a very busy person, and for the second time you made some time to talk with us here. So thank you very much, and I hope you will be well, and good luck with the next competition.
Thank you so much, Martin. It was great chatting with you guys. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Holly.